All right, what is up, guys? I'm Kagami Fukuno, and have a little bit of an interesting video. We're gonna be doing a bit of a draft review of one of the Ever Grand Prix ranked races that happened, I believe, on Thursday. So this is Lobby 2, which was the lobby I did not get to participate in. However, big shout outs to Boxer who was streaming it on Emerald Blitz Live, and we have a guest for today's little video. We have Jeans, one of the runners in this race. Jeans, you want to say hi and give yourself a little intro on what you're all about in this?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Jeans. Thanks for having me, Kagami. Yeah, today I just want to go over the draft from last Ever Grand Prix race, talk about sort of the decisions I'm making and what I'm thinking about as I'm doing the draft. Um, yeah, I think that's more or less it. So if you want to just get into the draft, I'd love to talk about my thoughts.
Yeah, so I'll kind of have some of the B-roll of this running, but also everyone please go check out Jeans' YouTube channel. I'll leave a link. He's been doing a lot of replays of his VODs from Ever Grand Prix. I believe you're 3 for 3, 4 for 4, if I remember correctly, in terms of getting to Hall of Fame in Ever
Yeah,
Grand
I
Prix.
have not wiped in the Ever Grand Prix yet, but I think the last race was a little on the slow side, so I got like fourth out of seven. So I
This
think with
was
the future races, I'm thinking more in terms of speed, because I know I
yeah,
have the consistency, but like if I'm not going fast enough, I'm gonna be placing third or fourth.
yeah. And as kind of the draft starts, we have big shout outs again to Boxer, Emerald Blitz Live. I'll leave a link to their Twitch channel. We start off with Murkrow, so I guess kind of as we're I don't know how quickly you start picking up Pokemon here, Genes, but what are kind of the things going into the draft that and I guess let's kind of give an intro of like how Emerald Blitz drafting works. So basically how it starts is every racer has $20,000 to start. There will be 8 times the number of players, amount of Pokemon. In this case, there are 7 racers, so there are 56 Pokemon of the total Emerald Blitz pool that's going to be out on display. And yeah, so obviously we're not going to see every Pokemon in the pool, but what are some of the things that you kind of go into? I see here Corsola being one of the first Pokemon you pick up potentially or start contesting for.
Yeah, so I ended up getting Corsola here. I think towards the beginning of the draft, since I don't really have any Pokemon yet, I'm really just looking for good deals. I'm looking to get Pokemon that I like for cheap. So you saw there I got Corsola for only 1900. I think that's such a steal because Corsola's really good in the early game. It's going to be a huge help against Flannery, and it can put in work against other fights like Viola and Winona. And Corsola has this like unique ability in Emerald Blitz where when it dies, it turns into like the ghost type Corsola. And
Yeah.
so because of that, you can really treat Corsola as like a free sack. And I think that's super valuable for 1900. I'm super happy about that.
Corsola is
So
one of my favorite Pokemon in Emerald Blitz for a lot of the same reasons, and like just the flexibility that you have of knowing that you can play a little more aggressively with it is super
right.
valuable. Like, but yeah, are there any like I guess you can and think of them as like pocket picks or like certain priority picks where you're like, oh, I definitely want to snap this up early on in the draft, or are there any types of Pokemon that you look at where you're like, these are what kind of I like to be like the starting blueprints for a good team? Like,
Yeah, I think this is kind of inspired by Boxer, but he always talks about the fire, water, grass core.
everyone take a
And
drink.
I think when I was first doing drafts, I like wanted to be a rebel and not use the fire, water, grass core because I thought I could like be creative and I didn't feel like I wanted to be restricted by this fire, water, grass core mentality. But the more I play, the more I realize it's just really, really good.
Hmm.
And it's also super consistent because there's a lot of fire types, a lot of water types, a lot of grass types. Um, and I feel just really comfortable going into the Elite Four with a fire type, water type, and a grass type. So a lot of these drafts, you'll see me get a water, fire, grass type early on, just because that sets like a good foundation for my draft.
I believe you're also pretty frequently a Steven picker when it comes to champions. In Emerald Blitz, you can pick between Steven and Wally at the start of the when you're in the room. Like, is there anything that like you picking Fire, Water, Grass Core kind of like leans you towards picking Steven? Is there ever something where you're like maybe the fire type isn't as hot as like one of the better ones, so maybe you consider switching it to a Wally at the last second? Are there any of those type of things that ever cross your mind when you're coming up with the fire, water, grass core?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of the times it has less to do with the fire, water, grass core and more to do with the other Pokemon I end up drafting. So I would say I'm never going to choose Steven if I have um, less than two Pokemon who have a strong matchup into Steel types.
Right.
So if I get, in addition to my Fire type, if I get like a Ground type or a Fighting type, usually I'd feel more comfortable going Steven than I would with Wally. I think there are exceptions, but I think I need to have real concrete answers to both the Garchomp and the Mega Gallade in order for me to consider going Wally instead.
And uh it's actually kind of an interesting thing because I think that the fire, water, grass, like we kind of joke about it a lot with Boxer, but that really is like kind of too good of a meta to pass up on. And we see here you pick up the Charmander for 2,700 right
Right,
there.
I think
Another
that's
really
another
strong.
steal, and now I've already got two members of my Fire Water Grass core.
Yeah, and Charizard, even though Mega Charizard Y is not necessarily available, Mega Charizard X is definitely really good into a lot of the late game gyms. Like I imagine you can see a lot of the different spots where he can go crazy in Steven, like against a Skarmory. I can imagine him going
Yeah,
nuts.
100%.
But yeah, so we talk a lot about the fire, water, grass core, and kind of like it's almost become like it's definitely a boxer mantra. It's definitely something that a lot of the racers run around. I myself am kind of the odd one out in a lot of ways, rocking the double water, double grass core. Is there any like obviously there are some drafts where you get a really dry spell or like an almost absence of certain types. In lobby one actually that or lobby two that you weren't in, we actually only had I believe four water types appear in the entire draft, and I picked up two of them. So it was like actually a drought, and um, that is how sometimes it plays out. But are there any of these types of things where you notice maybe there's a shortage of certain types, like ground type especially because there's so many good ground types, but sometimes ground types are completely absent in the race? Any of those type of things, like shortages in types that you're like considering as you kind of draft out?
Yeah, so actually, this is a big reason why I like to start by aiming for the fire, water, grass core. And you actually see on screen, I just got Cacnea, so I've already completed my fire, water, grass core, and I got the first fire type that showed up, the first water type that showed up, and the first grass type that showed up.
Yeah.
I like to bid aggressively on these Pokemon in the early game because I know that just forms a solid foundation. Um, and now that I have this core, I can really just focus more on filling in gaps, and I don't have like these big team dependencies I'm trying to fill in.
Right.
But I think there are definitely situations where I need a certain type and it doesn't show up. Um, and I would say like usually you can come up with some creative way around that. A lot of the times, Pokemon aren't necessarily like useful just for their types alone. So, like, if I don't get a ground type, for instance, it might make the Watson fight harder, but I probably just won't go with the Steven fight. I'll go Wally instead. And I think generally with Watson, like having a fire type and a grass type usually ends up being enough for that fight anyways. It makes it a little slower, but I feel like if I just take a firewater grass core and work from there, usually things end up working out.
Okay. So like I guess it's safe to say that you're a little more willing to, I wouldn't say sacrifice, but you're willing to kind of play towards like a bit of a weaker matchup in some aspect if it gives you more consistency to get to through the gym phase, which that's kind of the most important part of uh su- getting success in Emerald Blitz. I see you pick up this Timber just now, which kind of starts a bit of a dark and fighting psychic core, it seems like, because you can kind of overlap that with Cacturn and Conkeldurr. Are there any like archetypes that you're like looking at your draft right now? Like, are there what are kind of the things you're thinking of as like what holes am I looking to fill out in what order, or like what are the things that you're like, okay, I have my fire water grass core, but I notice I don't have like a physical damage dealer. Maybe I pick up this girder so that I have that as an option for, it's also good for Norman. Like what are some of the things that as you finish your core, you're kind of like, what do I want to pick up to complement the core basically?
So as I'm going through the draft, I have just like a list. I have some notes that I'm taking on pen and paper. I write out the names of all the gym leaders, and as I have members of my team that like beat certain matchups, I'll check off the gym leaders. And so at this point in the draft, I've got Corsola, Charmander, Cacnea, Timber, and Sneasel. So I've got good matchups into most of the fights, but the two that I don't have checked off at this point are going to be um, Viola and Raleigh. And I think Viola's, I might be able to be okay with that with Charmander and Sneasel, but I think if I can get like a Steel type, that's going to make that fight a lot more consistent. My team is definitely weakened to Brawly though. Once I get Charmander to evolve into Charizard, that'll be helpful. But for like early mid game Brawly, that feels like the real weakness in my team. So the next pick I'm gonna do is probably gonna end up being like a Psychic or a Fairy type just to fill in that hole.
Okay. So, yeah, that's actually another thing that I guess you kind of got me a good segue into. Uh, the timing of when your Pokemon evolve definitely also has a pretty big impact for how you want to build the team. Are there, and obviously there will be different ways to approach it. How do you approach like when your Pokemon get to their power spikes? Like you talked about how Charmander, when he gets to the Charizard, will help you out in the Brawly matchup that you were currently having a bit of a weakness in, but like, you know, that's not till the sixth gym or the seventh gym. So like you have six gyms basically where you're kind of stuck with just Charmander and you're kind of a lot weaker and that's why you're looking for the psychics and the fairies. Are there what kind of like power spikes or like timings for Pokemon are you like kind of cautious of? Like we all talk about Oracle Mons uh after Gym 4, Stone Evolutions after Gym 4, so it's like Gym 4 kind of acts as like the big like flux in power, but are there any other like gym timings where you're like, "Oh, I need to get past this gym before my team gets really online," or something like that?
Okay, so I have a couple things I want to bring up related to this question. The first is that I usually try to have some sort of balance between like what I consider early game mons and what I consider late game mons. So right now, Corsola and Sneasel on my team, I think of both of those as being early game mons because they just have really good stats for the early game.
Mm.
So like gyms 1 to 4, I know that they're gonna be generally a pretty high power level compared to most Pokemon. Um, and I think it's interesting you bring up Gym 4. I think that that's like a real gym where a lot of the times your Pokemon are right before they evolve because that's right before you get access to evolution stones and the Oracle. And so I think Gym 4 is easily the hardest fight in the game. I've started going for taking the like black market Pokemon for Gym 4 almost every run because I think that gym is
Oh.
so scary that having a consistent like the black market Pokemon are always really high in power level compared to that point in the game. And I think that just gives you a really consistent option for that fight.
And I guess to quickly explain for anyone who isn't familiar, in Slateport City, there is a very shady uh, dealer in the corner who will allow you to rent a Pokemon with a pretty high base stat total and a pretty solid moveset. Um, you're you're allowed to see what the Pokemon is before you rent, so that is a little bit of a like information that you're allowed to do before you kind of blindly throw money at the guy. With the only caveat being you have to give that Pokemon back the next gym that you complete, and if that Pokemon faints, he also penalizes you by taking an additional 6,000 Pokedollars from you if that Pokemon ends up getting fainted. And Jeans brought up that the Pokemon that you get from that rental are pretty good relative to Gym 4, which he uses to bridge his team's, like, I guess it's like a power trough in a way where a lot of Pokemon are like moments before getting fully online, but you just have to get over Gym 4 so that you can get access to the Oracle, the evolution items. Just getting to level 30 in general gets a lot of evolutions on. And yeah, so I think that's a really good way of approaching it. Obviously the rental Pokemon are completely randomized, so it's kind of, but you also have to remember that gyms are also randomized, so sometimes you just have to take the rental Pokemon and you just accept that you might not have a good matchup into it. Have you ever had that happen, Jeans, where you'll like, a great example I've seen is someone renting Delmise and then running right into Flannery E4. Like that's pretty feels bad, but there's not really much you can do in that situation. And
Yeah, um I actually did the weekly box earlier today and I rented a pincer for Flannery 4, which
ooh,
ended up hurting a little bit. But I also view it as your rental Pokemon can act as a free sack if you need it. And I guess it's not free because you end up getting charged $6,000 if that Pokemon dies. But paying $6,000 is, in my opinion, way less of a price to pay than losing one of your Pokemon.
mm-hmm.
So even if you end up with a bad matchup, bringing it with the idea that like if worst comes to worst, we'll use it as a sack, I think is kind of a good mentality to have.
I can agree with that. And we also see you pick up this Meowth for 26, filling out that steel type deficiency for the Viola matchup that you were talking about. So,
Right. So now
um,
Brawly's the only real hole in my team.
right. And, we're kind of barely getting halfway through the draft. You've obviously spent quite a bit in this draft. You're actually barely, not even half of most people. I believe Boxer's the only one you're a little bit more than half of money wise. Um, does this put you in any sort of just like, oh, I need to snap up these Pokemon for a little bit more than I probably would have normally? when you're kind of strapped for cash, is there some sort of like, how do you approach kind of budgeting out once you've spent quite a bit and you're a little bit lower than the rest of the party in the money department?
That's a good question. So I I will say this draft I've been spending pretty low amounts on my Pokemon. So I have 6 Pokemon, but I'm I think average cost wise, I'm definitely below 2,500 per Pokemon. So I've got 6,400 to spend. In theory, a party of 8 would mean I only need 2 more Pokemon, so that gives me like 3,200 per Pokemon.
Right.
Um, and so I think if I get a Brawly answer and then last, I'd probably want maybe. I think another water type would be good because I want to use Corsola as a sack at some point, and so I want a water type to bring to the Elite Four.
Okay.
And so those are
Um.
generally the two things I'm thinking about. And if I can get either one of those for under 3,200, I'm gonna be really happy.
Right. And to the like, and with respect to the rest of the lobby, everyone's also been paying quite a bit underneath our average price, which is unfortunately covered by my head. For the VTube
I think it
model
was
is,
2,417.
yeah, so it's like slightly under what an average distribution for the Pokemon would be. But you know, you were talking about getting a few of the Pokemon for a steal, like Corsola, you got for 1,900, I believe. You got Cacnea for like 18. I don't know if you happen to have the numbers off the top of your head or if you've got them pulled off to the side, but you do have a good balance of Pokemon that you spent a lot less for, and a few Pokemon that you spent about average. So you haven't really spent like, you haven't like swung for the fences and gotten like a super premier pick like big time money spent here. Is that
Right.
something that you're pretty comfortable with? Like a good example in this draft is I believe Rotom and Honedge are the only two really premier picks that have shown up. Are those like picks where you're like, if I can get them for a good price, I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring. But once I start seeing people getting to that 4K, 5K price, you can kind of like take your hands off the wheel and be like, nah, you guys can have fun with it.
Yeah, 100%. I was putting in bids for both of those Pokemon, but I don't remember how much Honedge went for. I think Rotom ended up going for like 5,400 at the end, and
Yeah.
so I was still bidding at like the 5K mark. I think 5,400 ended up feeling like too much for me, but I think both of those Pokemon would have been really nice to have. I think looking back at this draft, I had a really solid team, but I think having a top tier would have been really nice just for speeding things along.
Hmm.
It definitely felt like a team that I was comfortable with, getting to the Hall of Fame consistently with. But having lower power level Pokemon means you're inherently going to go slower in the race, and so it's a bit of a trade off you have to make.
I see. For just some maybe like hindsight 2020 context, Rotom came out as you got like a little bit after you got Cacnea, so you already had your Fire Water Grass core. Is that something where maybe in hindsight, maybe you are a little bit more willing to be more aggressive in picking up? Maybe you go a little bit higher, or maybe try and see if you can outbid Frat a little bit for it, or is that something where you're kind of like, I don't want to overspend too much because that would have been like barely 12 picks into the draft if I remember correctly when Cacnea comes
Yeah,
up. Like,
well, one, it felt a little too early to be spending that big.
Mm.
But I think I would also say spending 5,400 on Rotom. I think that Pokemon is amazing, but 5,400 is a really big price. And I wasn't confident if I kept bidding, I wasn't sure if I was really going to be able to fill in all the gaps in my team that I needed to.
Right. So as we kind of get over to the halfway mark of this draft, we kind of get a little snapshot of where everyone's at. We see kind of this interesting dynamic, and I've been seeing this a lot in both just Ever Grand Prix races as well as um near the end of the casual races. You kind of see this group where you have I talk about it a lot. I guess this is my catch-all word, prerogative, where you have the likes of KCH who has the majority of their money, but they haven't really drafted a whole lot. You have, you know, Boxer, Pratt, and DJ at a little bit more than half of their money. They've got, you know, about half of the team that they want to have going on. Um, when you're looking at the second half of the draft, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but do you look at the people who have more money than you and you're kind of like okay with them trying to outbid you for Pokemon, or is that something where it's like you you're kind of confident that they don't really want to spend that much money until a little bit later in the draft? Because that is something that I've been noticing, and I kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were on it before I kind of go into a little tangent on prerogative. If
Yeah,
geez.
definitely. I mean, I think a lot of my late game draft strategy comes from you've made like a big 5-page document on how you think about like the end of the draft. And I end up using a lot of those same principles. So at the end of this draft, I'm really thinking about, okay, who has more money than me? Who's gonna be able to like bid the highest bids for these Pokemon? I think right now, since we're only a little over halfway through the draft, I'm not too worried about that. But as we get towards the end of the draft, I'm going to start thinking about, okay, there's this many Pokemon left, and there's this many people who have more money than me. And if I want a Pokemon, I need to bid now, or else I'm not going to get another Pokemon.
Right. So I guess to kind of give people the recap or the introduction of prerogative. Prerogative refers to the special right or ability that someone holds over a certain other party. In the case of Emerald Blitz, prerogative refers to the fact that the person with the most money is inherently able to outbid the rest of the lobby because they have more money than everyone else. Pretty simple concept, but something kind of that I notice a lot is that a lot of people, when they have prerogative, they don't feel as like pressured to spend it. And I'm not sure if that's just like something that it's still a work in progress for some people to kind of adapt to, but I feel like there are definitely some Pokemon that uh some drafters with prerogative could just be like, oh, even though it may not be the best fit for me, the fact that I can still bid pretty like healthily for these Pokemon and still have a good lead against the rest of the lobby is something that I've always felt very it just didn't feel like a good way of closing out the draft, because you would get to these situations where it's like you get the last like 5 or 6 Pokemon in the draft, but because they're completely random, it's very leaving it up to fate in a lot of ways, and that's something that it's a little bit um like it brings that extra element of like things that aren't in your control in the race, if that makes sense. Genes.
Yeah, 100%. I think that I mean, the way I draft, where I'm sort of just looking at all the gym leaders, checking them off as I go. Um, if you notice at this point in the draft, I just got my Solosis a few
Right.
Pokemon ago. So now I've checked off every gym leader, and I can use the rest of my $4,600 to just like find a really good deal on a Pokemon that I want. And so now um, there's other people who have these dependencies in their teams that they need to fill. I mean, some people don't have like grass types to deal with Juan and Wallace. Some people are missing an overheat switch in. Whereas I'm able to just look at a Pokemon, and if I think I can get a Pokemon for a good deal, I'm gonna take it. And so that really helps me towards the end of the draft, where people are desperate for these picks.
Right. And I mean, we saw there with Horsey, at that time, I believe only half of the lobby had water types in to begin with. So like Horsey is normally a Pokemon that we would consider to be a little bit below average, not greatly underperforming, but it's going for 2,900 in this case because there are so many racers who have that lack of water type for their Flannery matchup, and it kind of drives the price up kind of organically in that manner because it's like water types are now going to be a pretty big premium for. Let's see here. Boxer currently doesn't have a water type, and KCH doesn't have a water type. You yourself said that you would like to get another water type potentially so that you can use Corsola as a sacrifice to go into ghost form. So that's something that we have kind of a consideration for. Are these the types of things
Right.
that we kind of look at and it's like, oh man, I'm surprised that some people aren't going for these picks, even though their team kind of needs it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it definitely it sometimes is surprising to me when I feel like I see someone with this like real dependency and I mean at this point in the draft there's only gonna be 16, 17 Pokemon after this.
Yeah.
So um if I had a real dependency on my team, like I would be bidding really aggressively here. But because I ended up getting a lot of these guys early on in the draft, I don't feel like I have these holes to fill in. And so here, actually, I end up getting Nimble for only 1,800 because I don't have any holes in my team. And I think Nimble for 1,800 is like a crazy steal. So,
I mean, you're getting a
um,
lot of very like solid Pokemon for kind of a really low price, honestly. I think you're averaging like maybe barely breaking 2K because I feel like you've gotten quite a few Pokemon for 1,800, it feels like, or.
yeah, 100%.
But as we kind of approach this back half of the draft, what are. Like, you're still looking ideally to get a water type, but, a pick like Litwick, for example, very high priority pick for a lot of people because of how strong it is. What are you thinking about when you see these like premier picks like coming down the line in the this late draft? Are you kind of like I all in because I only have this much money? Or are you more of a like I'll fish for it if I have the money? Like how do
I
you
think it
approach
depends
them?
on what I see. If there's something that really jumps out at me as being super strong, or something that people are just not bidding on and I can get for super cheap, I'm gonna take it. If nothing ends up feeling um, super like strong to me, I'm gonna wait to the end of the draft, and it'll probably end up coming down to chance whether I can get something that I want or not. But I think that the team in its current state feels good enough where I'm confident I can win. And so
Mm-hmm.
now it's just a matter of can I get like maybe some high tier Pokemon that people aren't bidding enough on that is going to bring this team to the next level.
Yeah, and I mean, there's actually a lot of just it seems like quite a few bangers kind of show up here. We have what was it? Froakie, we have Sandile. We have Poplio show up earlier.
Yeah, I mean, part
Litwick,
of me
like
was regretting not saving my money this draft because we got a lot of really strong Pokemon at the end. But I think the way I drafted was probably still correct just because you don't know what's going to happen at the end of the draft. And I think leaving it up to chance is too high variance of a strategy to go into it with.
I definitely agree, and that's kind of why I was kind of bringing up that point about people holding prerogative maybe a little too long. Sometimes I feel like sometimes you just have to get put something in the bag to add to your team because it's in front of you rather than hoping that something a little bit better shows up and leaving it all up to chance. As we're still looking for a water type, are there any other like typings, maybe certain matchups that you're looking at kind of as we are getting to the final 10 where you're like if it's not a water type, what is the next best thing that I would like to get? Although it seems like you get the Tortuga, so that might be a moot point.
Yeah, I end up going all in on this Tortuga because I figure I'm not going to get anything better. And I feel like if I bring like Charizard, Terracosta, Cacturne as my Fire, Water, Grass core into the Elite Four, that should be good enough. And I feel good about some of the other members of my team, like Berserker, Weavile, Reuniclus.
Conkeldurr.
I think that'll form a good enough Elite Four team. And so I say I don't think Tortuga's necessarily the best Pokemon I can get for 2,800, but I think it's a Pokemon that I feel confident I'm going to be able to win with, and I think that's good enough for me.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess since we're kind of letting things wrap up in terms of the draft side of things, and I'll let it play out. Are there when you're looking at these last few Pokemon, I imagine you have the team planner down in the bottom tab opened up so that you can kind of keep notes of what timings, what items you may need to pick up
Yeah,
before you
exactly.
load in. Is there anything you're looking at with these last 9 Pokemon where you're like, oh, you know, Tortuga was great, but maybe there was an angle where I pick up something else, or is it something where you're like that that could have been cool, but it's whatever. What's done is done. Like I
I'm
gotta.
so I'm gonna be real. Once I finish my draft, I usually end up tabbing out of the draft and
Okay, okay.
I start taking notes to figure out like um just strategies for each gym. I'll do a few calcs on like, okay, I think let's say like I think Caracosta is my answer to the Typhlosion. Can Caracosta one hit KO Typhlosion? And I'll just do a quick calc. I'll see if that's true. I'll do some calcs on if Caracosta can KO like certain members of Flannery's team, just because it's a Pokemon I'm not super familiar with using. Um, and yeah, I mean, I figure like what's left in the draft is not important to me because I'm out
Hmm.
of money and I'm just gonna let
Yeah.
it play out the way it plays out.
Okay. And actually, I guess that's one final thing. I guess before we end up closing out the draft, I imagine, you talking about how Tortuga is not a familiar Pokemon to you or something that you haven't used too much. Is there like kind of a what are kind of the things you think about when you look at a Pokemon that you're maybe unfamiliar with versus someone who you kind of have like known like in the back of your hand type of logic? Are there things that you're like thinking about adding to that like notebook in the back pocket in terms of learning something new about a Pokemon when you get them for the first time, or is that something where it's like you do all of that more so at the end of the draft or the end of the race to think about?
I think well going into a lot of these ranked matches, I've tried to start by prioritizing Pokemon that I have some familiarity with.
Mm.
So I would say like everyone up to Solosis is a comfort pick for me. Um, and I think I'd used Nimble maybe once before. I think Tortuga, this might have been my first time ever using Tortuga. But um, I think Tortuga is a water type, and it doesn't function too differently from a lot of other water types. So I at least have some baseline to go off of when using it.
Right.
Um, there's also like a few things I'm gonna end up just learning about it throughout the run because it's my first time using it. So like for instance, in the Elite Four, I found that using Reuniclus Trick Room and then setting up a curse with Caracasa ends up being like this crazy combo because you essentially get like an attack and a
Oh.
speed boost on your
Yeah.
Caracasa. And I think I used that in a couple different fights, and it ended up being really strong. And I was like, "Whoa, this is awesome!" Like I'd never really thought about this, but
Right.
it ends up being like a really strong combo to use.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the fun part of the draft. If people are interested in drafting, guys, also check out the Emerald Blitz Discord. Link will also be in the description to check that out. But yeah, that's something that I've always when I get to the end of my drafts, although I tend to play a little bit more for prerogative, I always try and find these wonky combos that maybe can add some juice to a certain synergy, maybe like finding these unique dynamics that um gives me an interesting advantage into like certain gyms or maybe certain matchups. And learning about the new Pokemon on the fly like that is always a bit of a pleasant surprise. And it's always good to hear from a fellow runner that the way you approach things, it's not that different. I mean, everyone approaches the draft with a lot of the similar characteristics, but for me, it's always nice knowing that there are people who have these cool approaches, and it's always fun to hear from it because I think draft is like the one part of the game that not very many people have ever vocalized, and it's always cool to hear from people try and explain it for the first time. So I gotta give my thanks to Eugene's for taking some time to kind of brainstorm and talk about draft with me here. Honestly, like it's super
Yeah, of
fun.
course. This was a great discussion. Thanks for having me. I thought you asked a lot of really good questions, and it was super fun to do this.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I'd love to hop on and do these types of things with other racers as well. With you again, if we ever find another race where maybe I think one of the coolest things also about having the VODs for these drafts is that you can always find something cool that you're like, oh, maybe there's this angle where I could have like drafted this Pokemon by doing this approach to building my team instead of sticking to like a game plan or things like that. And I'm sure when we find one of those races, I'd be happy to see if I can call up someone. Maybe you'll find a situation Gene's in. I mean, there's literally going to be a race in like an hour. Maybe you'll end up in that situation where you're
I
like,
think the
yo,
race is coming up in 6 minutes.
is it 6 minutes? I thought it was at 12. Let me get the fact check on that, but I believe you're correct. It's actually,
Yeah,
all
so
right.
I think we've got a race to head to.
Yeah. But I guess little outro and then I will uh have us pop over there. But thanks for also I'll pause this that way if we have the end of it. But that's about it for this little I guess discussion of drafting. Pretty cool EGP draft. This was a really interesting draft. I know we didn't talk too much about the other POVs where but everyone I feel like had a pretty strong draft considering how many interesting picks and how many interesting compositions kind of came up. Um, Big shout outs again to Boxer for having this streamed. Link to Emerald Blitz will be in the description as well as the Twitch channel so that you guys can watch these go live. Big thanks again, Jeans, for stopping by, and be sure to check
Yeah, of
out
course.
his videos. He does a lot of reviews of his own Ever Grand Prix races, and I believe this will kind of, I guess you can consider this a compliment piece to one that you can make for this race in the future. And yeah, that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again for having me, and I think I'm gonna head over to the Emerald Blitz server.
Yeah, and that'll just about do it for us. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And be sure to check out more Emerald Blitz live content.